Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Standard Open in Atlanta, part of the SCG Tour, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. I'm Nick Miller alongside SCG's own Emma Handy. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing pretty great today. I'm having a lot of fun.
So there was a lot of things going on this week with the ban announcement on Monday, and then a new addendum to the banned update midway through the week, which kind of threw all your testing previous to that out the window.
Yeah, after Monday's ban announcement, I stayed up from about when I woke up to when I went to bed and just played Moto. I asked for the week off because I was excited about the new set being on Magic Online, which is still awesome. But and all of that was thrown out the window on Wednesday. Wednesday
night around 6 o'clock-ish.
Yeah.
We get the emergency banning of Felidar Guardian. So you had been testing the 4-color Saheeli deck. You had to find something else. You ended up on this Jeskai control deck, which a lot of people, I think, who probably were kind of in the ballpark of playing a Saheeli deck, wound up playing a control deck of some kind. How did you arrive to this deck among the other decks you could have tried, with a limited amount of time before the update and the actual tournament?
So originally, the first thing that I wanted to think about were the things that Felidar Guardian pushed out of the format, which were the big things I thought of were the synergy decks that had to now play a bunch of removal and dilute their synergies to compensate for the combo, and Ishkanah. So I went to try and play a Delirium Ishkanah deck, and my friend was playing a Torrential Gearhulk deck and just kept smushing us. It got to the point where we were Dispossess is the cranial extraction for artifacts. We were getting those out of the Torrential Gearhulks out of their deck and still losing.
Just dying to Wandering Fumarole?
Yeah, exactly. So I asked for his list, figured if you can't beat him, join him, and I've been tuning that for a couple of days.
All right, so it's kind of cool because we get to see a lot of cards from Amonkhet show up in this deck now. That probably wouldn't have been here had everyone been playing Copycat.
Yep.
So we get Magma Spray, the much needed answer to the Scrap Heap Scrounger problem.
Yeah, it's great. You can play Magma Spray instead of Shock now because you don't have to deal with the backdoor justification of, well, this stops the Saheeli combo. Right. You shock the Saheeli in the middle of it, so now you can play Magma Spray.
In the world where they never have a counterspell, you get to stop the Saheeli combo.
Yeah.
Then we also get Cast Out and Censor, I think the kind of the marquee cycling cards from Amonkhet that you get to just place right in here.
Yeah, and you had mentioned them being newer cards, which is true, but in a lot of ways, they're so easy to slot in because they're very similar to old cards. Cast Out is just an Oblivion Ring with upside, especially in a flash deck like this, and Censor is very similar to Miscalculation, and for anyone who cubes a lot, that card's great. Yeah. That card's just great, and this is easier to cycle when it's bad.
All right. And then on top of that, we have some more cycling cards, your kind of situational, Forsake the Worldly, which you have some more in the sideboard. But the one I really want to talk about here is Pull from Tomorrow. This is the new Sphinx's Revelation. You're only running 2 copies. What was the kind of the split there? Because you have to play Glimmer with the Gearhulk, only 2 copies here?
Yeah, a lot of the time you want to be pulling, in my mind, for it to be worth it, you have to be doing it for 4. For it to really be mana efficient, not mana efficient, but worth the amount of mana you sink into it. Otherwise, it's just kind of a worse Jace's Ingenuity, or it is a worse Glimmer, and so on. You could just play in the new Divination that cycles, the instant speed one. You could play that instead if you're just doing it for 2. As a result, I think you can really only afford to play 2 because you have cards like Torrential Gearhulk and Fumigate that cost 1 million mana in a room full of Walking Ballistas and Heart of Kiran's, Gideon's. You can't just play 1,000,000 6-drops and cross your fingers all the time.
You'll get run over in more ways than one if you do that. So we have the control deck kind of choice. A lot of people have been moving to this over like the Teamer Dynavolt build. We have a lot of options here going on, so I want to ask you about the specifics because we kind of have these mishmatches of removal spells and counter spells between Harness Lightning and Immolating Glare versus Negate, Essence Scatter, and then your 3-drop counter spells, Disallow and Void Scatter. How do we come to the numbers on all these?
Well, I would play 10 Harness Lightnings if I could. That card is very close to Terminate. It kills everything you want it to kill. It's very rare you can't kill the creature you want to kill with it. So that one's maxed out. Immolating Glare is kind of the most versatile one. after that. The only difference is it's a lot worse against Tireless Tracker, and it's a lot worse against a Gideon, which, you know, Harness Lightning is going to be bad against in the first place, but you can't pick off Night tokens to swing in with your Torrential Gear Hulk. Then on the other side of things, you have the 2-drop counter suite in the Negates and the Essence Scatters. I am running more Negates than Essence Scatters because the decks where Negate is better, you will have time to draw out to find your Negate. Whereas Essence Scatter, if you don't have the early Essence Scatter on 2 or 3 or when it's important, the game is over. You have died. You do not have a chance to find your Essence Scatter. So I would rather just try to find my single copy of Negate game 1 and board in more game 2 and 3, rather than Essence get pantsed by creatures.
Right. You got to have your answer to the early creatures. You'll find the Negates later on for the bigger things, and, you know, vehicles or spells that really matter. Now the 3-drop counter spells here that are going along with the rest of them.
Sure. We have the Disallows, which a lot of times are just countering Planeswalker ultimates or being a counterspell, a cancel. And we are close to maxed out on Void Shatter because it exiles the thing, which, you know, reading the card to you.
Correct.
But it deals
relevant.
Yeah. It deals with later copies of Scrap Heap Scrounger, and it's also very good against the Ishkanah decks, which I thought we would see a few more of that it looks like people have brought this weekend, but it's also pretty good against the Torrential Gear Hulk decks at exiling the more important spells. You know, your Glimmer of Geniuses, their other counter spells, and so on. I think the exile is very relevant right now, particularly with the embalmed creatures and the Aftermath cards.
Right, we're seeing more of the Aftermath cards on camera than we kind of expected. We've already seen Cut to Ribbon show up.
Yep.
We've seen Reduced to Rubble show up. So all of them are kind of making a splash, at least the rare ones at least.
Sure.
And then I think it's kind of going unnoticed because these black-green decks, a lot of them are playing the new Liliana, which allows you to bring back the Ishkanahs and stuff. So the exiling is super relevant there.
Exactly, and Ceremonious Rejection's at an all-time low, and that's really the only big difference that they can answer it with is Ceremonious Rejection hits it and doesn't hit the Disallow, and I'm just not worried about it like you were seeing at the Pro Tour the last Pro Tour.
The last edition from Amonkhet, we've got Irrigated Farmland here, kind of your cycling land of choice. No reason not to have this in your control deck.
Yeah, it's great. It lets you, you know, a little bit of self-promotion, read my articles, blah, blah, blah. My article this week was about overloading on lands. Always don't cheat on your land count. That's the short version. Make sure you're not screwing yourself in the deck building process. And what that lets you do in this deck, even though you need to have specific answers at each stage of the game, it lets you still find a way to fit 27 lands into your deck and find those spells.
As a control deck, you want to be hitting your land drops more importantly than pretty much any other deck, and then just having this kind of versatility between the farmland and the Wandering Fumer will act as a win condition. You get to play all the lands.
Exactly, and another bonus of those is that they, previously because you're a 3-color deck, you can't play very many basics. So Prairie Stream is not very good. But Port Town is actually a lot better than it used to be because you have basics, you have Prairie Stream, and you have the farmland, which all allow it to come into play untapped early, which is a very big deal.
No more Temple of Tilt, as a lot of people have referred to them as.
Look, you can cry one if you want. I'm not going to stop you.
Let's take out the sideboard here. We have a lot of cards that are already in the main deck you kind of have extra copies of, but I want to talk about some of the big cards here. We have like the control breaker of choice here, the Sphinx of the Final Word, along with some other cards that can kind of be threats. Along with Nahiri, we have Linvala and Avacyn, kind of as this extra package of threats.
Yeah, the Sphinx of the Final Word was just the best thing I could think of for the mirror. I played against someone online who had Metallurgic Summonings, and that was pretty spicy, but I think Forsake the Worldly is good enough and Cast Out are good enough to where I don't really want to try to rely on that. That also doesn't bring into account that on top of being a 5/5 flying hexproof creature, Sphinx of the Final Word also means all of your counter spells resolve, all of your draw spells resolve. You are doing what you want to do, and that's such a big deal. And the other threats, the Nahiris and Archangels come in almost every matchup, but they're so much better post-board. Game 1, they have a glut of Grasp of Darkness, Fatal Push, Harness Lightning, all of these removal spells that are just sitting and rotting in their hand. And you play an Avacyn and it's just going to die instantly, every time. But post-board, they board some of those out, and a lot of decks are just relying on Manglehorn to kill Torrential Gear Hulk, and you play an Avacyn, and you 4 them, and you 4 them, and you 4 them, and you 4 them, and they die.
That's 20.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic zig. When they zag, they're going to take out the removal, you're going to bring in your things, then they have to play the guessing game of, well, how much removal do I keep in against this deck that might not have that many threats to really answer.
Exactly. Unlike a lot of the Archangel Avacyn decks, the indestructible ability is really only making it a pretty good blocker the turn you cast it. And after that, it's just a good old-fashioned Sarah Angel.
Right. We have more rats between Fumigate and Radiant Flames, kind of as your early answer to the Swarm decks, because a lot of people have kind of talked about or dreamed up these red and black mono-color decks.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I did not want the Radiant Flames in the main deck because they're not so impactful against some of the aggro decks in the format, like the green-black Snake deck. Just uses Nissa and Snake and Rishkar to grow their creatures out of range. But post-board, you're really going to want it against your Thalia's Lieutenant decks. Any of the priced Amalgam decks are making a bunch of zombies a lot of the time, and you just want to get them out for as little mana as possible. I think that for that reason, I don't want them main, but you really want them in the 75.
Okay, so you're 3-1 throughout 4 rounds so far. What has kind of been the best part of this deck, and what's something you're looking to kind of improve with a few rounds under your belt now?
The best part about this deck is how well it can claw back from a game that it looks like it's lost. It's pretty good at playing from behind and catching up. There was a game against green-white tokens earlier where my Torrential Gearhulk had been cast outed, and I had cycled a Forsake the Worldly earlier. So I Torrential Gearhulked, Forsake the Worldly to exile cast out, got back Torrential Gearhulk, Harness Lightning their Avacyn, and then blocked 2 creatures. And it looked like I was dead on board through 2 removal spells and still ended up winning that game.
Sure.
There are just a lot of ways to turn it around. I think the biggest thing, at least on my list, that needs to be improved is the Mardu matchup. I am a little bit softer to it than I'd like to admit, just because I was kind of hoping it would be hated out more this weekend, or people would kind of just poo-poo, everyone's going to be prepared, so I'm not going to be the one to bring it. I think I maybe should have respected it a little bit more than I am, and hopefully it won't bite me so much. Okay.
Well, in wrapping up, I know you invest a lot of time in the Saheeli deck, so you only had a couple of days to kind of prepare here. Are you still happy that, the cat is no longer here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I am happy that the cat is gone now that the sky is no longer falling in the world of Emma, but I wish they'd done it better.
All right. I think we can all agree there. For everyone at home, I'm pretty sure they're happy they're not seeing it this weekend. So.
Oh, absolutely. It's pretty great to see. I'm sure they've seen 4 or 5 different decks at this point. I don't know if that would have happened otherwise.
I'm pretty happy. Well,
I mean, the coverage guy, I'm sure you didn't want to report the top 64 deck lists and go, well, there are about 196 Felidar Guardians in the top 64. And
wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah.
All right, well, Emma, thanks for joining me here on the sideboard. We wish you the best of luck. 4 rounds in so far. Everyone at home, stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all week long for the action here in Atlanta.